I thought I'd seen enough of life after 40 years living with cattle until that morning. I came home from Denver expecting quiet cattle and mountain air, but instead I found a steel padlock that looked like it belonged on a prison cell, not a ranch gate. Standing beside it was a young woman in a beige blazer, holding the key, her face red with fury as she shouted, "You no longer have access. From this point on, your road is ours, and so are the rules." All I wanted was to get my herd back before dark. I looked at the bolt cutters in my toolbox, then back at her, and realized this wasn't about a lock. I'm Earl, and this is the story of how an HOA Karen tried to fence me out of my own land, so I took the road, the rules, and every ounce of control back. Drop a comment, where are you watching from? The morning started like any other. I'd driven down to Denver to visit my daughter Sarah and her kids, spending 3 days away from the ranch. My neighbor Jake had promised to check on the cattle, so I wasn't worried about leaving for a few days. The drive back through the Colorado mountains was peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you appreciate living away from the city noise. But as I turned down the familiar dirt road that led to my property, something was wrong. Very wrong. There, blocking the gate to my ranch, was a massive steel padlock that definitely hadn't been there when I left. The chain was new, industrial grade, the kind they use on construction sites. Standing beside it like she owned the place was a woman I'd never seen before. She couldn't have been more than 30, wearing a beige blazer that looked completely out of place on a dusty ranch road. Her hair was straightened to perfection, her high heels were ridiculously impractical for the terrain, and she held a tablet in one hand and a set of keys in the other. The whole scene looked like a corporate takeover of rural America. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, stepping out of my truck and adjusting my old brown t-shirt and faded jeans. My cowboy hat felt more necessary than ever as I faced this city slicker who clearly didn't understand where she was. "That's my gate you've got locked up there. My cattle need to get through." She looked me up and down like I was some kind of trespasser on my own land. Her expression was a mixture of condescension and manufactured authority that immediately got under my skin. "You're Earl Withers, I presume," she said, consulting her tablet like she was reading from a legal document. "I'm Erica Langford, the newly elected president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. As of today, you no longer have permission to use this road for your commercial livestock operations. You've been trespassing on private HOA property for years, and it ends now." The way she said it, so matter-of-fact and final, made my blood pressure spike. 40 years I'd been using this road. 40 years before this HOA even existed. I reached into my truck bed and pulled out my bolt cutters, the steel gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Ma'am, I don't know what kind of authority you think you have, but this road has been my access route since 1985. I'm going to cut this lock and get my cattle home." That's when Erica Langford showed her true colors. Her face went from pale to bright red in about 2 seconds flat. She stepped forward, pointing her manicured finger directly at my face and started screaming like a banshee. "You are not cutting that lock. You are trespassing on private property. I'll call the sheriff. I'll have you arrested for destruction of property." Her voice echoed across the valley, probably scaring every deer within a 5-mile radius. But something in her tone told me this wasn't just about property rights. This was about power, control, and someone who'd gotten a little taste of authority and let it go straight to her head. I paused with the bolt cutters in my hand, studying her carefully. "Tell you what, Miss Langford," I said, my voice calm and measured. "You seem pretty confident about your legal standing here. Why don't we both take a step back and do this properly? But I want you to remember this moment, because you just picked the wrong person to mess with." I put the bolt cutters back in my truck, but not because I was backing down. I wasn't backing down. I was backing up, just far enough to get a running start and how to beat her at it. After 25 years driving trucks across this country, I'd learned that the best way to handle a roadblock wasn't always to smash through it. Sometimes you had to find a better route. As I drove away that evening, taking the long way around to reach my ranch, an extra 8 miles through rough terrain, I couldn't stop thinking about Erica Langford. Something about her didn't add up. She was too prepared, too confident, and too eager to shut down a road that had been in use longer than she'd been alive. I had a feeling this was bigger than just an overzealous HOA president flexing her muscles. And if there's one thing 40 years of ranch life had taught me, it's that when someone tries to corner you, you better be ready to fight back twice as hard. What Erica Langford didn't know about me could fill a book, But the most important thing was this. Before I became a rancher, I spent 25 years driving 18-wheelers across this entire country. I knew traffic laws, property rights, and road regulations better than most cops. More importantly, I knew how to research, how to dig deep, and how to find the truth when someone was trying to pull a fast one. That night, instead of stewing in anger, I got to work. My first call was to Miles Edgerton, the best property lawyer in the county and an old friend from my trucking days. Miles had helped me navigate the purchase of my ranch back in '95, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped move his entire law office during a particularly nasty divorce. "Earl, what's got you calling this late?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "Some HOA princess thinks she can lock me out of my own property," I replied. "I need you to dig up everything you can find about public right-of-ways on County Road 12. Miles was quiet for a moment, then I heard papers rustling. "Give me until morning. If there's a legal angle here, I'll find it." The next morning, Miles called me at 5 a.m. with news that made my day. "Earl, you're not going to believe this. Earl, that road's more public than a courthouse sidewalk, and the HOA just walked into their own lawsuit. The county never transferred ownership to any private entity, including the HOA. They have no legal authority to block access." I felt a grin spreading across my face as wide as the Colorado sky. "So what you're telling me, Miles, is that not only can I use that road, but I might have grounds to claim maintenance responsibility for it." Miles chuckled. "That's exactly what I'm telling you. In fact, as the adjacent property owner who's been maintaining it for decades, you might have a stronger claim to it than anyone else." Before heading back to confront Erica, I decided to take a slow walk along the disputed road, really looking at it for the first time in years. About halfway down, there it was, a shiny new metal sign reading, "HOA property, do not enter," in bold red letters. I stopped and ran my fingers along its cold surface, feeling the weight of bureaucratic authority trying to rewrite 40 years of history. I'd never seen a piece of lifeless metal that could be so infuriating. The sign felt like a slap in the face. A middle finger pointed directly at everything I'd built and maintained on this land. Armed with Miles's legal information, I drove back to my locked gate at precisely 8 a.m., knowing Erica would probably be there for her morning power trip. Sure enough, there she was, standing next to the gate like a sentry, checking her phone and looking every inch the self-important bureaucrat. This time, I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my bolt cutters and walked straight to the lock. "I warned you yesterday, Miss Langford. This is a public road and you have no authority to block it." The sound of steel cutting through steel echoed across the valley as I snapped that lock clean in half. Erica's reaction was even more dramatic than I'd expected. She started screaming at the top of her lungs, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. "You're destroying property, I'm calling the police, you can't do this." But I just calmly opened my gate and drove through, calling back to her, "Ma'am, the only crime here is you blocking a public road. Have a blessed day." What happened next showed me exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. Instead of backing down or seeking legal advice, Erica doubled down. By noon that same day, she'd installed not one, not two, but 3 new locks on my gate. Industrial-grade padlocks that would have made a prison warden proud. She'd also hired a private security company to post a guard 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The cost had to be running at least $200 per day. And I knew that money was coming straight out of the HOA fees. But here's where Erica made her biggest mistake. By hiring security with HOA funds to block a public road, she just handed me the ammunition I needed to destroy her. See, when you use community money for personal vendettas, you're not just breaking HOA rules, you're potentially committing fraud. And when that fraud affects someone's livelihood, like mine was being affected by having to drive an extra 8 miles twice a day to reach my cattle, well, that's when the law gets very interested in your activities. That evening, as I drove the long way home again, losing precious daylight and burning extra fuel, I started calculating the real cost of Erica's power trip. The lost time, the extra mileage on my truck, the stress on my cattle from delayed feeding schedules. It was costing me hundreds of dollars every week, but more than that, I'd lost a $3,000 monthly contract to supply milk to a local dairy, because I could no longer guarantee on-time deliveries. Erica Langford had just declared war on my livelihood, and she had no idea what kind of enemy she'd made. As I pulled into my ranch that night, past tired cattle and under a sky full of stars, I made myself a promise. Erica wanted to play games with locks and private security? Fine. But I was about to show her what happens when you mess with someone who knows the system better than you do. Tomorrow, I wasn't just going to cut her locks, I was going to take control of that road entirely. And if she wanted to keep escalating, I'd make sure every dollar she spent came back to bite her twice as hard. The thing about small communities is that word travels fast, especially when someone starts throwing money around like it's confetti. Within a week of Erica's security detail taking up residence at my gate, the phone calls started. First, it was Hank Barrett, a mild-mannered accountant who lived 3 houses down from the HOA office. "Earl, I hate to bother you, but do you know anything about this $200 a day security expense showing up on our HOA budget? Because according to my calculations, that's going to require a significant fee increase for all residents." I let that sink in for a moment. Erica didn't just buy locks. She bought a financial time bomb and handed me the detonator. "Hank, I appreciate you calling. How many families are in the HOA?" 47, he replied. "Well then, you're looking at about $150 per family per month, just to pay for guards to watch me drive my cattle around." The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Hank Barrett was starting to do the math, and he didn't like what he was seeing. The second call came from Doris Kellerman, a 75-year-old retired teacher who'd lived in the area since before the HOA existed. "Earl, folks are starting to whisper. And in a town this small, whispers become votes. Some of us remember when this was all open range, and that road was just a dirt track that everyone used." Doris had a way of getting to the heart of things that I appreciated. "Mrs. Kellerman, I'm not trying to cause trouble for the community. I just want to run my ranch the way I have for 40 years. "Oh, I know that, dear, but Erica's been telling people that you're some kind of threat to property values and community safety. She's scheduled an emergency HOA meeting for tomorrow night, and I think you should be there." Doris paused, then added with a chuckle, "Besides, I've been recording some of these confrontations on my phone and sharing them with my quilting circle. Let's just say public opinion isn't exactly on her side right now." The emergency HOA meeting took place in the community center, a modest building that had seen better days. I arrived wearing my heaviest work jacket, not because it was cold, but because I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a working rancher who didn't have time for corporate nonsense. The moment I walked through that door, every eye in the room turned toward me, like I'd just walked into someone else's house without knocking. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife, and I could feel the weight of 47 families' curiosity and judgment pressing down on my shoulders. Erica stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation loaded and ready, her beige blazer freshly pressed and her confidence apparently intact. But when she looked at me, her expression was ice cold, without a trace of the false friendliness that some people use to mask their hostility. Her face was a mask of professional disdain, the kind of look that said she considered me nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. It was the face of someone who'd already decided I was guilty before any trial had begun. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, clicking to her first slide. "We're here to discuss a serious security threat to our community and the necessary measures we've taken to protect property values and resident safety." The slide showed a grainy photo of me driving my cattle down the road, with the word "repasteurizing" in big red letters. I almost laughed out loud at the melodrama of it all. But then Hank Barrett raised his hand. "Erica, before we get into the presentation, can you explain why we're spending $6,000 a month on private security without a community vote?" The room went dead quiet. Erica's composed expression flickered for just a moment. "The board has the authority to make emergency expenditures for community safety. This falls under that provision." Hank wasn't satisfied. "What emergency? Earl's been using that road for decades without incident. The only thing that's changed is you deciding to block him." That's when I stood up and the room turned to look at me. "Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Earl Withers, and I've been your neighbor for 40 years. I'm not here to cause trouble or threaten anyone's property values. I'm here because Ms. Langford has decided to block a public road with your money, and I thought you should know what that's really costing you." I pulled out a piece of paper with my calculations. $6,000 a month for security, plus legal fees I'm sure she hasn't mentioned yet, plus the inevitable lawsuit when this all falls apart. You're looking at a fee increase of at least $300 per month per family. The reaction was immediate and loud. Voices started, raised across the room, demanding explanations, questioning authority, and generally expressing the kind of frustration that only comes when people realize they've been played. Erica tried to regain control, but she'd lost the room. 3 families stood up and walked out. 5 more demanded to see the financial records, and Hank Barrett announced that he was calling for a vote of no confidence in the current board. But here's where Erica showed her true colors. Instead of backing down or trying to find a compromise, she got angry. Really angry. "You people don't understand what's at stake here," she shouted over the crowd. "This man is running a commercial operation through our neighborhood. He's bringing down property values and creating safety hazards." Then she pointed directly at me with that same manicured finger from our first encounter. "If you won't support the board's decisions, then maybe you should find somewhere else to live." The room went dead silent again, but this time it was the silence of shock rather than confusion. Telling 47 families to move because they disagreed with her was political suicide, and Erica had just committed it in front of witnesses. Doris Kellerman stood up slowly, her 75-year-old frame radiating dignity and quiet authority. "Young lady, I was living here when this was all grassland and prairie dogs. This road existed before your HOA, before your development, and before you were even born. If anyone needs to find somewhere else to live, it's people who think they can rewrite history to suit their agenda." As I drove home that night, taking the long route again because the locks were still there, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of a good fight. Erica had overplayed her hand spectacularly. She'd turned a property dispute into a community revolt, and she'd done it with their own money. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Tomorrow, I was going to start the process of officially claiming ownership of that road, and when I did, Miss Erica Langford was going to learn what it really meant to mess with the wrong person. Sleep didn't come easy that night, but not because I was worried. I was excited. For the first time in weeks, I had a clear plan, and it was beautiful in its simplicity. If Erica wanted to play games with ownership and authority, I was going to show her what real authority looked like. By dawn, I was at Miles Egerton's office with a cup of coffee and a folder full of documents. "Miles, I need you to file a petition with the county to officially designate me as the maintenance authority for County Road 12. According to everything you've found, I have the strongest legal claim as the adjacent property owner who's been maintaining it for decades." Miles spread out a county map from 1962, its edges yellowed with age. He ran his finger along the red line that marked the road boundaries. "Earl, this is brilliant. If the county grants your petition, you won't just have the right to use the road, you'll have the authority to control access and charge maintenance fees." The legal process took 3 weeks, but it was 3 weeks well spent. While the county reviewed my petition, I gathered evidence. Photos of every repair I'd made to the road over 40 years, receipts for gravel, culvert pipes, and road salt, testimonies from neighbors who'd seen me fixing potholes and clearing snow. By the time I walked into the county clerk's office, I had a file thick enough to choke a horse. As I sat in that government office, waiting for the clerk to review my paperwork, a thought struck me that filled me with quiet satisfaction. I wasn't a lawyer, but I believed in one simple truth. If someone wants to drag you down into the mud, then the law can also be the ladder you use to climb back up. The very system that Erica thought she could manipulate to control me was about to become the weapon I used to defeat her. My eyes must have lit up like Christmas morning when I realized just how perfectly her own arrogance had set the trap she was about to fall into. Meanwhile, Erica was digging herself deeper into trouble. The security guards were costing the HOA $200 a day, 7 days a week. She'd hired a lawyer to contest my petition, adding another $200 a month to the community's bills. Hank Barrett had started sending detailed financial reports to every HOA member, and the numbers were ugly. In just 1 month, Erica's war against me had cost the community over $7,000. But the real coup came when I discovered something that Erica had apparently overlooked in her research. The HOA had never actually filed the proper paperwork to claim ownership of the road. They'd simply assumed it was part of their development when they formed the association in 2005. It was a rookie mistake that was about to cost them dearly. On a crisp Tuesday morning in October, I received the call I'd been waiting for. The county had approved my petition. I was now the official maintenance authority for County Road 12, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. I thanked the clerk, hung up the phone, and immediately called the hardware store to order the biggest, most official-looking sign they could make. The sign read, "Park Road, maintained by E. Withers, authorized vehicles only." I installed it at exactly 8 a.m. on Wednesday morning, right in front of where Erica's security guards had been keeping their vigil. Their confusion was almost comical. Here they were, guarding a gate on a road that was now officially under my control. Erica arrived 15 minutes later, probably expecting her usual morning confrontation with a stubborn rancher. Instead, she found me standing next to my new sign, holding a clipboard and wearing my most professional expression. "Good morning, Miss Langford. I have some news that might interest you. As of yesterday, I am the county designated maintenance authority for this road. That means these security guards are now trespassing on my property." The look on her face was priceless. Confusion, then disbelief, then mounting panic as the implications sank in. "That's impossible. This is HOA property. We've been managing this road for years." I pulled out my official county document and handed her a copy. "Ma'am, the county records show that this road was never transferred to HOA ownership. You've been managing property that didn't belong to you." But here's where I played my ace in the hole. "Now, Miss Langford, as the official road authority, I'm implementing a usage fee for all non-adjacent property owners. That would be $5 per vehicle per trip. Since your HOA members have been using this road to access the main highway, and since you've been so concerned about proper legal procedures, I'm sure you'll want to comply with the new regulations." Erica's reaction was everything I'd hoped for and more. She started screaming about lawsuits and property rights and calling the sheriff, but this time her tantrum fell on deaf ears. The security guards, realizing they were now standing on private property without permission, packed up their equipment and left. The legal authority she'd been wielding like a weapon had just been turned against her. By noon, she'd hired another lawyer, this one specializing in property law and charging $300 an hour. By evening, she'd called another emergency HOA meeting to discuss this outrageous abuse of legal technicalities. But the damage was done. Word was spreading through the community that their HOA president had been so careless with basic property research that she'd handed control of their main access road to the man she'd been trying to block. That night, as I sat on my porch looking out over my land, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete satisfaction. Erica had wanted to flex her authority and show everyone who was boss. Instead, she'd handed me legal control of the very road she'd been trying to block me from using. And tomorrow, I was going to start collecting my $5 usage fees. 47 families, multiple trips per day, 7 days a week. Let's see how long it took for the community to do the math on that one. The beauty of small-town politics is that everybody knows everybody, and secrets don't stay secret for long. Within 48 hours of my taking control of the road, I started getting phone calls from people I'd never met. The first was from a reporter at the Denver Post who'd somehow gotten wind of the rancher versus HOA war, as she called it. The second was from Erica's boss at Westfield Development, and that conversation was particularly enlightening. "Mr. Withers, this is Jennifer Walsh from Westfield Development. I understand there's been some conflict between you and our employee, Erica Langford." I let her continue, curious about where this was heading. "We want you to know that Erica's actions regarding your property dispute were not authorized by our company. In fact, we were not aware that she was serving as HOA president until this situation came to our attention." Now that was interesting. "Ms. Walsh, are you telling me that Erica didn't mention she was using her position to block access for a development project?" There was a long pause. "Mr. Withers, we had plans for a 50-lot subdivision in that area, but those plans were preliminary and never approved. If Erica suggested otherwise, she was acting without company knowledge or approval." After hanging up, I sat back and smiled. Erica hadn't just been abusing her HOA authority. She'd been freelancing on behalf of her employer, making promises and taking actions that could expose Westfield Development to significant liability. Companies hate liability, especially when it comes with negative publicity and potential lawsuits. The Denver Post article ran 3 days later, complete with photos of my road sign and quotes from several HOA members expressing frustration with their leadership. The headline read, "Rural Road Dispute Highlights HOA Overreach," but the real blow came in the article's final paragraph, which mentioned that HOA fees had increased by over $200 per month to pay for security measures and legal fees related to the ongoing dispute. Doris Kellerman had been busy too. Her recordings for the quilting circle turned out to be a series of videos that were making their way around social media faster than gossip at a church picnic. The most popular one showed Erica screaming at the security guards after they'd abandoned their post, with the caption, "HOA Karen loses it when her illegal roadblock gets shut down." It had been viewed over 2 million times in just 2 days. But Erica wasn't going down without a fight. In a move that showed just how desperate she'd become, she hired someone to vandalize my property. At 2 a.m. on a Thursday night, someone cut my fence lines and left my gates open, allowing my cattle to wander onto the main highway. It was dangerous, expensive to fix, and could have resulted in serious accidents. More importantly, it was a felony. I'd learned a few things about security during my trucking days, so I'd installed cameras around my property after the first lock incident. The footage was crystal clear. A man in dark clothing working methodically to damage my fences, while a familiar sedan waited nearby with its engine running. But what the camera caught next was even more damning. Erica herself standing beside my mailbox, pounding on it repeatedly with her fists, her eyes wild with rage, screaming like a woman who had completely lost control of her world. The license plate was clearly visible, and it took the sheriff's department exactly 4 hours to trace it back to a rental car paid for with Erica Langford's credit card. But they didn't need to work that hard. The audio on my security system had picked up her final, desperate declaration. "I am the HOA. I have the right." Those words, screamed into the night air just before the police cars arrived, would become the most damaging evidence against her. The arrest happened at 8 a.m. on Friday morning, right in front of the HOA office where Erica was attempting to hold another emergency meeting. Doris Kellerman was there with her phone, naturally, and the footage of Erica being led away in handcuffs became the most watched video in Willow Creek history. The charges included conspiracy to commit vandalism, endangering public safety, and misuse of HOA funds because she'd paid for the vandalism with money from the community account. That's when I made my final move. I installed a billboard-sized sign at the entrance to the HOA development. HOA fees increased $200 per month due to poor leadership. The sign was perfectly legal, installed on my newly controlled road property, and visible to everyone entering or leaving the community. But more importantly, it was accurate. Between security costs, legal fees, and now criminal defense attorneys, Erica's personal vendetta had cost every family in the development an additional $250 per month. The community meeting that night was standing room only. Hank Barrett had assumed temporary leadership of the HOA, and his first order of business was reading the total financial damage: $11,000 in security costs, $8,000 in legal fees, and $5,000 in emergency assessments to cover Erica's criminal defense fund. $24,000 total, all because one person couldn't accept that a rancher had the right to use a public road. But I wasn't done yet. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the packed room, "as the official controller of County Road 12, I'm implementing my usage fee starting Monday morning. $5 per vehicle per trip. I estimate that will generate approximately $200 per month per household based on average usage patterns." The silence was deafening. Then someone in the back shouted, "You can't do that!" But I could, and I had the county documentation to prove it. However, I wasn't unreasonable. "I'm prepared to offer a discount," I continued. "Any household that publicly supports a vote of no confidence in the previous board leadership can reduce their monthly road fee to $50, and any household that agrees to a formal apology for the harassment I've endured will pay no fees at all." It was checkmate, and everyone in the room knew it. Erica had gambled with their money and lost. Now they had to choose between paying me or admitting their former president had been wrong from the start. By the end of that meeting, 38 of the 47 households had signed formal apologies. The remaining 9 agreed to pay the reduced fee. Erica Langford, sitting in a county jail cell awaiting bail, had managed to unite an entire community against her. Justice has a funny way of working itself out, especially in small towns where everyone knows everyone else's business. The morning after Erica's arrest, I got a call from the county sheriff himself, a man named Tom Rodriguez, who'd grown up on a ranch about 20 miles from mine. "Earl, I wanted to personally apologize for the harassment you've endured. We should have looked into the property records weeks ago when this whole mess started." Sheriff Rodriguez had more news for me. "We've been investigating Mrs. Langford's finances, and it turns out the vandalism was just the tip of the iceberg. She's been using HOA funds for personal expenses, including paying for her legal representation in this dispute with you. The district attorney is considering additional embezzlement charges." I wasn't surprised. People who abuse authority in one area usually have problems in others. But the real satisfaction came that afternoon when I received a certified letter from Westfield Development. Jennifer Walsh had kept her word about distancing the company from Erica's actions. The letter formally terminated Erica's employment and included a cashier's check for $8,400, compensation for my lost milk contract, and additional expenses incurred during the road dispute. They'd also withdrawn their preliminary plans for the 50-lot subdivision, citing community relations concerns. That evening, as I drove home using my own road for the first time in 2 months, I reflected on how quickly things had changed. The security guards were gone, the locks were gone, my gate stood open and unobstructed, just as it had for 40 years. But the real victory wasn't just regaining access to my property. It was watching an entire community learn the difference between leadership and authoritarianism. Doris Kellerman's latest video showed the scene at the county courthouse as Erica was released on bail. Looking tired and defeated in clothes that were rumpled from spending the night in jail, she bore little resemblance to the confident HOA president who'd confronted me just weeks earlier. Her beige blazer was wrinkled, her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, and her authority was completely gone. The community that had once followed her leadership was now demanding her resignation. The emergency HOA meeting that Saturday was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Hank Barrett, now officially elected as interim president, read a prepared statement outlining the full extent of Erica's financial mismanagement. Beyond the obvious security and legal costs, she'd been padding expense accounts, authorizing unnecessary consulting fees, and using HOA funds to pay for her personal continuing education in community management. The total embezzled amount exceeded $15,000. But here's where the story took an unexpected turn. As Erica stood before her former neighbors, facing calls for criminal prosecution and civil lawsuits, something in her demeanor changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by what looked like genuine remorse. "I want to apologize," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I let the authority go to my head and I made decisions that hurt this community and hurt Earl personally. There's no excuse for what I did. I found myself in an unusual position. I had every legal right to pursue maximum damages and criminal penalties. The community wanted blood, and Erica had certainly earned whatever punishment came her way. But sitting there, watching a young woman who'd made terrible choices face the consequences of her actions, I remembered something my father had taught me. Sometimes, the best victory is helping your enemy learn to be better." "Miss Langford," I said, standing up slowly, "you cost me money, time, and considerable frustration. But you also taught this community something valuable about the difference between leadership and bullying. I have a proposal." The room went quiet, everyone leaning forward to hear what I had to say. "I'll drop all civil claims against you personally, and I won't pursue additional criminal charges under one condition. You work at my ranch for 6 months, without pay, learning what it means to earn an honest living through hard work." The offer shocked everyone, including Erica. Here was a chance to avoid prison time and civil bankruptcy, but it meant swallowing her pride and accepting help from the man she'd tried to destroy. After a long moment, she nodded. "I accept your offer, Mr. Withers, and I promise to do whatever it takes to make this right." That night, I replaced my $200 fee increase sign with a new one, Community Road, fees reduced thanks to mutual respect. The usage fees I'd threatened were quietly forgotten, replaced by a simple agreement that the HOA would contribute $50 per month toward road maintenance, a fraction of what they'd been paying for security and legal fees. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sun set over the Colorado mountains, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. The road dispute was over, the community was healing, and somehow, in the middle of all the conflict, everyone had learned something valuable. Erica was about to discover what it meant to work with cattle and soil and weather instead of boardrooms and PowerPoints. The HOA was going to get new leadership focused on community service rather than authority, and I was going back to the quiet life of ranching that I'd always preferred. 6 months is a long time in a small community, long enough for wounds to heal and perspectives to change completely. Erica Langford's first day at my ranch was awkward for both of us. She showed up in designer jeans and expensive boots that had never seen mud, looking like a city girl playing dress-up as a cowgirl. By the end of that first week, covered in dust and manure, she looked like she was ready to quit and take her chances with the legal system. But something remarkable happened in the second week. As she learned to properly feed cattle, mend fences, and handle the daily routines that keep a ranch running, I saw glimpses of the person she could be when she wasn't drunk on power. She asked intelligent questions, worked without complaining, and slowly began to understand the rhythms of agricultural life, that had stained this valley for generations. "Earl," she said one morning as we repaired a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm, "I need to ask you something. Why did you offer me this opportunity instead of just destroying me completely? You had every right to pursue maximum damages." I handed her a fence post and considered the question. "Erica, I've been ranching for 40 years, and one thing I've learned is that sometimes the land teaches you lessons you can't learn anywhere else. You made mistakes, but you're not a bad person. You just forgot that real authority comes from serving others, not controlling them." The transformation wasn't instant or dramatic, but it was genuine. As spring turned to summer, Erica developed calluses on her hands and a tan on her face. She learned to read weather patterns, understand animal behavior, and appreciate the satisfaction that comes from hard, physical work. More importantly, she began to understand why I'd fought so hard to keep my access road. When you're responsible for living creatures, when their health and welfare depend on your ability to move freely and respond to emergencies, every minute counts. The community noticed the change too. Doris Kellerman, who'd become something of a local celebrity thanks to her viral videos, invited Erica to join her quilting circle. Hank Barrett asked for her input on HOA budget planning, recognizing that her corporate experience could be valuable when applied constructively. Even the families who'd lost money because of her poor decisions began to see her differently as she worked to make amends. But the real test came in July, when we had a medical emergency with one of my prize bulls. The animal had gotten tangled in old barbed wire and needed immediate veterinary attention. As we loaded him into the trailer for the trip to the emergency clinic, Erica didn't hesitate to get in the truck and help me navigate the fastest route through traffic. Her knowledge of the area's development patterns and road systems, combined with her quick thinking under pressure, probably saved that bull's life. "You know," she said as we drove back from the clinic that evening, "I finally understand why you fought so hard for that road. It's not just about convenience or property rights, it's about being able to take care of what matters to you." I nodded, thinking about all the times over the years when quick access had made the difference between life and death for my animals. "That's exactly right, Erica. Authority should be about protecting and serving, not controlling and restricting." As her 6-month commitment neared its end, Erica made an announcement that surprised everyone, including me. She'd been offered a position with the Colorado Agricultural Preservation Trust, a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting farmland from unwanted development. The job would allow her to use her corporate skills and legal knowledge to help farmers and ranchers navigate the complex world of property rights and zoning regulations. "I want to spend my career protecting people like you instead of hassling them," she told me on her last day at the ranch. "This whole experience taught me that real communities are built by people who understand the land and respect each other's right to make an honest living." She paused, looking out over the pasture where cattle grazed peacefully in the evening light. "I'm sorry it took me so long to learn that lesson, and I'm grateful you gave me the chance to learn it the right way." The day she left for her new job in Denver, the entire HOA community gathered at the road entrance for an impromptu celebration. Someone had made a cake, Doris brought her famous potato salad, and Hank Barrett gave a speech about second chances and community forgiveness. But the moment that meant the most to me was when Erica quietly handed me an envelope containing a cashier's check for $3,000. Every penny she'd saved from her modest salary at her new job. "I know this doesn't cover everything my stupidity cost you," she said, "but it's a start. I'll send more as I'm able." I handed the check back to her. "Erica, you've already paid what you owed. Take this money and use it to help other people avoid the mistakes you made. That's worth more to me than any financial compensation." 6 months later, I received a card from Denver with a photo of Erica standing next to a sign reading Henderson Ranch, Protected Agricultural Land. Inside, she'd written, "Thanks to you, I learned that real power comes from helping people achieve their dreams instead of blocking them. This ranch will stay in farming forever because we found a way to make preservation profitable. I think you'd be proud of what we accomplished here." As I sit on my porch tonight, looking out over the road that caused so much trouble and ultimately brought so much good, I'm reminded that the best victories aren't about defeating your enemies. They're about helping them become better people. That road has been traveled by my family for 40 years, and now it will be traveled by my grandchildren for 40 more. Sometimes the longest way around really is the shortest way home. If you've ever lived in an HOA community, you know what it feels like to have someone make arbitrary rules about your own property. Do you think I should have completely forgiven Erica, or kept that road as a reminder that not everyone can control someone else's land? Leave a comment below if you've ever had to deal with unreasonable HOA demands. I'd love to hear your stories.